I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, my worn suitcase trembling in my hand after 8 long years away. The familiar yellow paint was peeling now, but my heart still raced with hope that maybe, just maybe, my family would welcome me back. When my brother Marcus opened the door, he looked at me like I was a stranger who had wandered onto the wrong doorstep. Those 5 words that came next shattered everything I had dared to hope for. No one wants you here. Behind him, my parents appeared in the doorway, and when they slowly nodded in agreement, my entire world crumbled beneath my feet. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever felt unwanted by the people who should love you most. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story gets much deeper than you might expect. And what happened after I picked up my stuff changed everything. Growing up in our modest ranch house in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, the Walker family seemed picture perfect from the outside. My father James worked as a civil engineer, methodical and precise in everything he did, while my mother Patricia dedicated her life to nursing, caring for others with the same gentle hands that once bandaged my scraped knees. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone knew each other, where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and where Sunday dinners were sacred family time. Marcus, my older brother by 3 years, had always been the golden child. At 21, he possessed everything my parents valued: straight A grades that came effortlessly, a spot on the high school football team that made my father beam with pride, and a practical mindset that aligned perfectly with their vision of success. He was studying engineering, following in our father's footsteps, and everyone expected him to take over the family business someday. Marcus carried himself with the confidence that comes from knowing you are exactly what your parents hoped for. Then there was me, 18-year-old Valerie the dreamer, who spent her afternoons sketching in the margins of textbooks and painting watercolor sunsets that no one else seemed to understand. While Marcus calculated equations and strategized football plays, I lost myself in art galleries during school field trips and spent my allowance on sketchbooks instead of makeup. My bedroom walls were covered with paintings I had created, each one a window into a world that felt more real to me than the structured life my family had planned. The tension in our household had been building like storm clouds for months. Every family dinner became a battlefield where my parents questioned my priorities and my future. They wanted me to follow a practical path to study nursing like my mother and secure a stable career that would provide financial security. Art in their minds was nothing more than a hobby, a pleasant distraction that had no place in serious life planning. The breaking point came during my senior year when I announced my intention to study fine arts at the Art Institute of California. The application was already submitted, my portfolio carefully curated with my best pieces, and I had been accepted with a partial scholarship that I had worked tirelessly to earn. I thought they would be proud of my acceptance, impressed by the scholarship, but instead the dinner table erupted into chaos. You want to throw away your future on what? My father demanded, his engineering mind unable to comprehend how art could sustain a life. Do you have any idea how much money we have invested in your education only for you to waste it on finger painting? His words cut deep, each one designed to diminish the passion that burned so brightly within me. My mother, usually the peacemaker, sided with him completely. Valerie, honey, you need to think practically. Art is wonderful as a hobby, but you need a real career. Nursing would give you stability, benefits, a way to help people and support yourself. You could always paint on weekends. Her voice was gentle but firm, as if she was explaining something obvious to a child who could not understand. Marcus, who I had desperately hoped would support me, delivered the final blow. Mom and Dad are right, Valerie. You are being completely selfish and unrealistic. Do you think the world needs another starving artist? You are just a kid who does not understand how hard life really is. Grow up and pick something that actually matters. His words stung worse than my parents' disapproval, because I had always looked up to him, always sought his approval. Night after night, the arguments continued. They presented statistics about unemployment among art graduates, stories of creative people who ended up in poverty, and practical alternatives that would guarantee a secure future. But every fiber of my being knew that nursing, while noble and important, would slowly kill the part of me that felt most alive. I love creating, loved the way colors blended on canvas, loved the way a blank page could become anything I imagined. For an entire year, I worked multiple part-time jobs after school and on weekends. I cleaned offices in the early morning hours before classes, worked retail on weekends, and babysat neighborhood children in the evenings. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account marked California Dreams. I watched my friends enjoy their senior year while I counted quarters and calculated bus routes to interviews for yet another job that would bring me closer to my goal. When the Art Institute confirmed my acceptance and the partial scholarship that would cover 60% of my tuition, I felt like I was holding my future in my hands. The remaining cost would be steep, requiring student loans and continued work. But it was possible. I could make this dream reality if I was willing to sacrifice and work harder than I had ever worked before. The night I announced my final decision to leave for California, our house felt like a war zone. My mother cried at the kitchen table, tissues scattered around her like fallen leaves, while my father paced the living room with the controlled fury of someone trying not to explode. Marcus stood in the doorway between them, arms crossed, shaking his head in disappointment. "If you walk out that door to chase this foolishness," my father said, his voice steady but cold, "do not expect to come crawling back when reality hits you. We will not be here to pick up the pieces when your little adventure falls apart." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke, choking out any hope of compromise. My mother's tears turned to desperate pleas. "Please, sweetheart, just think about this rationally. Stay here, go to community college, study something practical. You can take art classes on the side. Why do you have to go so far away?" But her words felt like chains, beautiful and loving chains that would bind me to a life that was not mine. Marcus delivered his final judgment as I packed my belongings into 2 suitcases and a backpack. "Do not expect to be welcomed back here with open arms, Valerie. You are making your choice, and choices have consequences. Do not think you can just waltz back into this family when your dreams do not work out the way you planned." His words followed me as I loaded my car with everything I owned, driving away from the only home I had ever known toward an uncertain future. The first months in California tested every ounce of determination I possessed. My dorm room in the Art Institute was barely larger than my childhood closet, with thin walls that leaked every sound from neighboring rooms and a window that looked out onto a parking lot instead of the creative campus I'd imagined. My roommate was a girl from New York who treated art school like an extended vacation, staying out until dawn and sleeping through most of her morning classes. I worked 25 hours a week at a coffee shop near campus, memorizing orders for pretentious customers who treated me like furniture while I served their complicated drinks. My hands, which should have been holding paintbrushes instead, gripped coffee pitchers and wiped down sticky tables. Every evening after work, I would return to my tiny room exhausted but determined to complete assignments that demanded creativity when I felt completely drained. But slowly, something magical began to happen. My professors recognized the raw talent that my family had dismissed, and they pushed me to develop skills I never knew I possessed. Professor Richardson, a woman in her 60s who had exhibited in galleries across Europe, pulled me aside after my first major project critique. "You have something special, Valerie," she said, studying my mixed media piece that combined photography with painted elements. "Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. This work has depth and emotion that cannot be taught." My fellow students became the first people who truly understood my passion. We would spend hours in the studio together, sharing techniques and encouraging each other through creative blocks. Sarah, a sculptor from Oregon, became my closest friend, and we would often work side by side in comfortable silence, each lost in our own artistic worlds. These friendships felt different from anything I had experienced before, built on shared understanding rather than family obligation or geographical convenience. As semesters passed, my work grew more sophisticated and confident. I discovered a love for graphic design that complemented my fine art training, learning programs like Photoshop and Illustrator that opened doors I had never considered. My professors began recommending me for freelance projects with local businesses, small jobs that helped supplement my coffee shop income while building a portfolio that showcased my versatility. Despite my growing success and happiness, the silence from home felt like a constant ache. I wrote long letters to my parents describing my academic achievements and the recognition I was receiving from professors. I sent photographs of my artwork, hoping they might see the beauty and skill that others praised. Every letter went unanswered, returned to sender, or simply ignored, leaving me to wonder if my family had truly erased me from their lives. Holiday seasons were the worst. While my friends traveled home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, I remained in California, working extra shifts at the coffee shop to afford rent while campus grew quiet and empty. I would call home on Christmas morning, my heart hammering as the phone rang, hoping for some softening in their resolve. My mother would answer with a voice so cold and distant that she might as well have been speaking to a telemarketer. "How is nursing school going?" she would ask, as if my actual life did not exist. "Mom, I am studying art. Remember, I am doing really well." My professors think I have real talent, and I'm starting to get freelance work that pays actual money. I would explain, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice that might somehow convince her. That is nice, dear. Your father wants to talk to you. But when my father came on the line, our conversations consisted of weather reports and generic questions about my health. Neither of them asked about my friends, my artwork, or my dreams. Marcus never came to the phone at all, as if I'd become a ghost haunting their family dinners. By my third year, I had almost stopped calling. The rejection was too painful, and I was building a life that felt authentic and fulfilling without their approval. I had been selected for a prestigious internship at a design firm in San Francisco, working with clients whose brands would be seen by millions of people. My professors were encouraging me to apply for graduate school, and I was being invited to participate in group exhibitions that might launch my career as a professional artist. Then, during my final semester, a call came that changed everything. My mother's voice was different this time, softer, and filled with the kind of sadness that immediately alerts you to tragedy. Valerie, I need to tell you that your grandmother passed away yesterday. The funeral will be this weekend. Grandma Dorothy. My mother's mother had been the one person in my family who had always encouraged my artistic dreams. She had bought me my first set of oil paints when I was 12, and her spare bedroom was filled with artwork I had created over the years. I want to come home for the funeral, I said, my voice breaking with grief and hope combined. Grandma would have wanted me there, and maybe this could be a chance for us to talk, to work things out as a family. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that I wondered if we had been disconnected. The funeral is private, just for immediate family. My mother finally said, each word carefully chosen. I think it would be better if you stayed in California. Grandma understood your choices, and she would not want you to disrupt your studies. But I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, as if she was reading from a script someone else had written. I made the decision that would lead to the moment on the front porch that shattered my last remaining hope. Using the money I had been saving for graduation expenses, I bought a plane ticket to Cleveland and took a bus to my childhood neighborhood. I convinced myself that grief would soften their hearts, that losing Grandma would remind them how precious family really was. I pictured a tearful reunion, apologies on both sides, and the beginning of a new chapter, where my success could finally make them proud. The house looked smaller than I remembered, with paint peeling from the shutters and a front yard that needed attention. I stood on the porch where I used to wait for the school bus, my suitcase heavy with the weight of 8 years of separation and hope. When I pressed the doorbell, the same two-tone chime echoed through the house, bringing back memories of countless afternoon returns from school. Marcus opened the door wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans that looked like he had been wearing them for several days. His face, which had been handsome and confident in high school, now carried the soft edges of someone who had stopped taking care of himself. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, brother and sister separated by years of silence and hurt. "What are you doing here, Valerie?" His voice was flat, devoid of any warmth or surprise that might have suggested he was happy to see me. Behind him, I could hear the television playing a talk show, at too high a volume, the way elderly people sometimes did when their hearing started to fail. "I came for Grandma's funeral," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the obvious hostility radiating from him. "I know you said it was private, but she was my grandmother too, and I loved her. I thought maybe we could all be together during this difficult time." My words sounded rehearsed, even to my own ears, practiced speeches I had delivered to my bathroom mirror during the flight. Marcus let out a laugh that contained no humor whatsoever. "Grandma's funeral was yesterday, Valerie. You are too late as usual. She was buried while you were probably painting flowers or whatever it is you do out there in California." Each word was designed to hurt, delivered with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to aim for maximum damage. Yesterday. My heart sank as I realized that my mother had deliberately given me the wrong date, ensuring that I would miss the service entirely. "But Mom told me it was today." "She said this weekend, and I thought that meant Saturday or Sunday. So I flew out as soon as I could get time off work." "Mom and Dad are here," Marcus said, turning toward the interior of the house. "Mom, Dad, come see who decided to show up." His voice carried the tone of someone announcing an unwelcome surprise, like finding a raccoon in the garbage. My parents appeared behind Marcus, and the sight of them hit me harder than I had expected. My father looked older, his hair completely gray now, and his face carrying the lines of someone who had spent years worrying about things beyond his control. My mother seemed smaller somehow, as if grief had physically diminished her, and she would not meet my eyes directly. "Valerie," my father said simply, his voice carrying the same emotional distance that had characterized our phone conversations. "We did not expect to see you." There was no embrace. No acknowledgement that I had traveled across the country to be with family during a difficult time. I came to pay my respects to Grandma and to see all of you, I said, setting my suitcase down on the porch as if I planned to stay. I know we have had our differences, but surely we can put them aside to grieve together and maybe start healing our family. The words felt desperate even as I spoke them, the pleading of someone who refused to accept the obvious. Marcus stepped closer to me, his voice lowering to a tone that was somehow more menacing than if he had shouted. Let me make this crystal clear for you, Valerie. No one wants you here. You made your choice 8 years ago when you decided that your little art projects were more important than family. You cannot just show up now and expect us to pretend like nothing happened. I looked past him to my parents, desperately searching for some sign of disagreement, some indication that Marcus was speaking only for himself. But when my mother finally met my eyes, she slowly nodded her agreement, and my father's slight nod confirmed what Marcus had said. They stood united against me, a wall of rejection that felt impenetrable. But I have been trying to stay in touch, I said, my voice beginning to crack under the weight of their combined disapproval. I sent letters and photos of my work. I called on holidays. I graduated with honors, and I'm building a successful career. I thought you would be proud of what I have accomplished. Even as I spoke, I could hear how pathetic I sounded, like a child begging for approval from parents who had already made up their minds. Proud? Marcus laughed again, but this time there was genuine anger behind it. You think we should be proud that you abandoned your family to chase fantasies? You think your little paintings matter more than the people who raised you and loved you? His words grew louder with each sentence, drawing the attention of neighbors who might have been watching from their windows. It was then that I began to understand what had really happened during my 8 years away. Through the open door behind them, I could see into the living room where Marcus clearly had been living. Empty beer cans lined the coffee table, and a pile of blankets on the couch suggested that he had been sleeping there rather than in his own apartment. The confident, successful young man I had left behind had somehow disappeared, replaced by someone who looked lost and angry at the world. My mother spoke for the first time since I'd arrived, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of years of disappointment. You chose strangers over family, Valerie. You chose your art over the people who loved you first. We begged you to stay. We offered you alternatives, but you decided that we were not enough for you. Tears began to form in her eyes, but they felt like accusations rather than sadness. My father, ever the engineer, delivered his judgment with cold logic. You broke your mother's heart 8 years ago, and there is no coming back from that. We have learned to live without you, and frankly, we are better off. You cannot just decide that you want to be part of this family again when it is convenient for you. His words hit me like physical blows, each one more devastating than the last. I looked around at the 3 people who had once been my entire world, searching for any crack in their united front, any hint that the love we had once shared still existed somewhere beneath their anger and resentment. But their faces were set in stone, and I realized with horrible clarity that I was not looking at family anymore. I was looking at strangers who happened to share my DNA. I understand, I said quietly, picking up my suitcase with hands that shook from more than just the weight. I understand that you have made your choice just like you say I made mine. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, even when you stopped loving me. My voice was steady now, filled with the sad dignity of someone who had finally accepted an unacceptable truth. Marcus followed me as I walked back toward the street, as if he needed to make sure I actually left their property. Do not come back, Valerie. Do not call. Do not write letters. Do not send your artwork that no one wants to see. You are not part of this family anymore, and showing up here just proves that you are still as selfish as ever. His final words followed me down the sidewalk like stones thrown at my retreating figure. I sat in the rental car for nearly an hour, parked 3 blocks away from the house where I had learned to ride a bicycle, and spent countless summers catching fireflies in mason jars. The tears came in waves, 8 years of suppressed grief finally finding their way to the surface. I grieved for my grandmother who had died believing in my dreams, but without seeing them come true. I grieved for the family that had chosen to cut me out of their lives, rather than accept the path I'd chosen. But most of all, I grieved for the naive hope that had brought me back to Cleveland, the childish belief that love could overcome such deep-seated resentment. But as I sat there, something began to shift inside me. The pain was real and overwhelming, but underneath it, I felt a strange sense of relief. For 8 years, I had carried the weight of their disapproval, always wondering if I had made a mistake, always hoping that someday they would change their minds and welcome me back. Now I knew with absolute certainty that they never would, and that knowledge, as painful as it was, also set me free. I drove straight to the airport and changed my ticket to the earliest available flight back to California. During the 6-hour journey, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I would stop waiting for their approval and start building something that was entirely my own. I would take the love and support I had been trying to give them and redirect it toward people who actually wanted it. Back in San Francisco, I threw myself into my work with an intensity that surprised even my professors. The pain of rejection became fuel for creativity, and I produced some of the most powerful and emotionally resonant work of my entire career. My senior exhibition, titled Family Portrait, featured paintings that explored themes of belonging, rejection, and the families we choose rather than the ones we inherit. The response was overwhelming, with gallery owners and collectors expressing serious interest in my work. After graduation, I was offered a position at Morrison Design Group, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. My starting salary was more than my father had ever made as an engineer, and my work began appearing in national advertising campaigns and major corporate branding projects. I rented a beautiful apartment in the Mission District with north-facing windows that provided perfect light for painting and enough space to set up a proper studio. But the real healing began when I started volunteering at a community center in Oakland, teaching art classes to teenagers who reminded me of myself at their age. Many of them came from families who did not understand their creative ambitions, who saw art as a waste of time rather than a legitimate career path. I became the mentor I had wished for during my own teenage years, the adult who said yes when everyone else was saying no. Sarah, my friend from art school, introduced me to a group of artists who met monthly for dinner and creative collaboration. These people became my chosen family, celebrating my successes and supporting me through challenges in ways my biological family never had. When I exhibited my work in a solo show 2 years after graduation, they filled the gallery opening with enthusiasm and pride that felt like coming home. I learned to cook elaborate dinners for friends who appreciated both the food and the effort, something my family had never done for my achievements. I traveled to art fairs and exhibitions across the country, building a network of collectors and fellow artists who valued my work and my perspective. I dated people who found my passion attractive, rather than threatening, who wanted to hear about my latest projects, rather than dismiss them as hobbies. 3 years after that devastating visit to Cleveland, I received an email that I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Marcus had somehow found my professional email address and written a long message that began with apologies and ended with requests for reconciliation. He explained that he had finally gotten his life together, found a job, and moved out of our parents' house. He admitted that his anger toward me had been largely jealousy over my success. While he struggled with failures he had been too proud to acknowledge. The email revealed what I had suspected during that awful confrontation on the porch. Marcus had dropped out of college during his junior year, unable to handle the pressure of living up to our father's expectations. He had spent years bouncing between minimum wage jobs and periods of unemployment, all while watching my career flourish from a distance through mutual acquaintances and social media searches he thought I would never discover. I was wrong, his email said. We were all wrong. You had the courage to follow your dreams while I was too scared to even try. I spent years convincing Mom and Dad that you were selfish and ungrateful because it was easier than admitting that you were brave, and I was a coward. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday we might be able to build some kind of relationship. I read his message several times over the course of a week, feeling the familiar pull of family loyalty and the equally strong need to protect myself from further hurt. In the end, I wrote back a carefully crafted response that was kind, but clear. I told him that I forgave him and hoped he found happiness, but that forgiveness did not mean we could simply return to being siblings as if nothing had happened. Too much damage had been done, too many years had passed, and I had built a life that no longer had room for people who might decide to reject me again when circumstances changed. My parents never reached out directly, but Marcus told me in subsequent emails that they had expressed regret about the way they had handled my departure and my attempted return. My mother had kept some of the letters and artwork I'd sent over the years, stored in a box in her closet like artifacts from an archaeological dig. My father had apparently bragged to his colleagues about my professional success, taking credit for raising a daughter who had achieved so much conveniently, forgetting the years of disapproval and rejection. But their regret felt hollow to me, like an apology offered only after the consequences of their actions had become clear. They were proud of my success now, because it reflected well on them, not because they had come to understand or value the passion that drove me. Their change of heart felt like validation of my achievements, rather than acceptance of my choices. and I realized that I no longer needed either one. The community center where I volunteered asked me to develop a program for young artists whose families did not support their creative ambitions. I created workshops that combined practical skills like portfolio development and college applications with emotional support for teenagers navigating family conflict over their futures. Watching these young people grow into confident artists who believed in themselves gave me more satisfaction than any gallery opening or professional recognition ever could. Last month, I received an invitation to exhibit my work at a prestigious gallery in New York, the kind of opportunity that represents the pinnacle of success in the art world. As I stood in the gallery space surrounded by paintings that told the story of my journey from rejection to acceptance, I realized that I had built exactly the life I had dreamed of as an 18-year-old girl packing her bags in Cleveland. The opening reception was attended by collectors, critics, and fellow artists who understood and appreciated my work. Sarah flew in from Portland, where she now runs her own successful sculpture studio. My mentor, Professor Richardson, now retired, but still sharp as ever, stood proudly next to my largest painting and told anyone who would listen about the promising young student she had taught years ago. These people, my chosen family, celebrated my success with the kind of genuine joy that made all the struggles worthwhile. I thought about that moment on the porch in Cleveland when Marcus had told me that no one wanted me there, and my parents had nodded in agreement. They had been right in a way. No one wanted me there in that house and that life, in that version of myself that required their approval to feel complete. But they had been wrong about everything else. People did want me, just not the people I had expected. I was wanted by students who needed mentorship, by clients who valued my creativity, by friends who appreciated my loyalty, and by a community that had embraced me exactly as I was. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by evidence of the life I'd built from nothing but determination and dreams, I finally understood that their rejection had been a gift. It had forced me to become strong enough to create my own definition of family, my own measures of success, and my own source of love and acceptance. Sometimes the family that truly loves you is not the one you are born into, but the one you choose to build. And that is not just okay, it is perfectly enough. So, if you found yourself relating to my story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me about your own journey of finding your chosen family, or how you learned to value yourself even when others could not see your worth. Do not forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the most difficult moments. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your dreams are valid, your passions matter, and you deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate who you truly are, rather than trying to change you into who they think you should be.